So we are delighted to be talking today with organist Amanda Mole. Amanda is in Rochester right now, and she is joining us today, and we are so excited.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can talk about how you got started on your instrument.
It's kind of an interesting, funny story. I I started out actually going into science. Both my parents well, they're retired now, but they were research biochemists. And so that was sort of I was set on that in that direction of studying medicine actually. Um, but I was a year younger than everybody in my grade, and I remember my junior year, everybody could work and hold a job. And um, I remember, I came into junior year, I was 15. And I remember everybody is that right? I think I was 15, or maybe it was my sophomore year that everybody could get a job. You could get a job legally in Massachusetts at age 16. Um, and they all got jobs and they were super excited about it. And, it's kind of hard being a high school student, I think, working your first job and they're not treated the best, and people in customer service not treated the best. So I saw a lot of my friends kind of get deflated at working their first jobs as bagging groceries or at Wendy's or wherever they could get a gig. And I said, well, I don't think I want to do that by the time I turned 16. And I had been going to church all my life. I grew up American Baptist, and my mom had always taken me to church and I'd always heard the organ. And I had played piano since I was 5. So I thought, well, this could be something really interesting and fun. I think the organ is really cool. So I started taking lessons, and they sort of started very structured, which teenagers need. But at the time, I think I was like a little bit more, I've always been a little bit more the anti-structure. So I really wanted to play the pedals. I didn't want to play hymns as much, but like I really wanted to just play the pedals by themselves. And I really needed to in order to learn it properly, because I remember learning my first hymn was so difficult. It was Ferris Lord Jesus, Shunster Jesu, which is a fairly easy hymn for many of us organists who have been playing for a while. But I remember just banging my head against a wall, struggling. It was so hard. And I was playing, Beethoven sonatas and Rachmaninoff on piano, and I just came to this instrument and I felt like, I was 5 years old again. So it was very humbling at first, but I knew that it was going to take some practice and commitment. And I think most kids, by the time they play the organ, by the time they're physically big enough to reach the pedals, they've learned a lot about practice techniques and a lot about how to pay attention and sit down and focus for 5, 15, 10 minutes, an hour sometimes at a time. And so a lot of them have learned that skill, and I had learned that skill in my piano lessons. But it's hard to kind of start over, so to speak. People think it's a similar instrument, but it's not at all. So I think starting playing was a little bit of a struggle, and I started the summer between my junior and senior year. And finally, one day I just wanted to have some fun with it, and I remember playing solfeggiato, which was essentially one line, but it was something that I played on piano, and just moving it to the pedals and trying so hard to get every single note in the pedal. And that was a little bit off the beaten path. It wasn't something that I was going to necessarily do in church. It wasn't as useful for the reason I was taking lessons, but I was having so much fun with it. And then I remember my teacher, Tricia Snyder, introducing me to the Eight Little Preludes and Fugues and the Guillemot First Sonata and Vier and Carillon de Westminster. And I remember just thinking, this is so cool. This repertoire is amazing, and it's all so different. And it spans such a huge time period. I remember being really impressed by that and kind of getting sucked in, because there's the history of it too, right? I mean, we play things that, if you're playing from the Buxheimer Codex, you're playing things that are about 1,000 years old. But then there are pieces that are still being composed for the instrument today. and that you have this huge range of everything in between, and it's so so cool. I mean, even during the classical period where we had quite a lull in producing uh, organ works, we still have transcriptions by like Mozart and things like that, and plenty of like CPE Bach. That's, I think that just having so much different repertoire I found really intriguing and exciting. Like there was so much to learn. So I decided, long story short, that I was going to take organ lessons, and that it was originally going to be so that I could play in church and I could make as much money playing at a Sunday service as many of my friends were making, working their very difficult overnight jobs. And that I would enjoy this because I really like music and I like the organ. And I ended up liking it a lot, as it turned out. And so that's when I decided, oh, I think I might want to do this in college. So I had gone into college as a double major, and I really lucked out with the most amazing teachers, with Tricia Snyder and Larry Shapool. They happened to be at Mount Holyoke while I was at UMass, so I could commute there and take lessons with them on fabulous instruments. But I wanted a bit more of like an organ community of folks my age, so I ended up transferring to Eastman. And that's really how I got started. And then I always sort of loved that, like, kind of show offy stuff, like in the pedal especially. And I think that's where I found a kind of a calling as a concert organist from the beginning. Because while there are a lot of things that I enjoy in church music, especially choral music, I really love like getting up and playing this huge span of repertoire for folks, and being able to choose pieces that work really well on different instruments and also get to play different instruments. That's part of the adventure, I think.
So I've never heard that idea that during the classical period, that the kind of writing for organ kind of dropped off. Do you have any, like, do you know why that was, or have any speculation?
I mean, there were a few reasons. One in particular that we could talk about for a while. One in particular was the French Revolution. For example, everything that had been composed in France had been liturgical up until that point. It had been composed on Catholic chant. And when they had the French Revolution around the turn of the 19th century, that was building for a while, and they were destroying organs all throughout France. And there were a few really intelligent organists who said, wait, 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 wait. We can play national music on the instrument too. Here, look at this. And they played national music, and they saved some of the instruments, but unfortunately more were destroyed than saved. But once Napoleon wasn't in power anymore, then they could go back to playing liturgical music on the organs. But it was sort of, it was taboo. It was like this instrument that was identified with the church and identified with Catholicism, and that was woven so tightly together with religion, that's a big reason for a drop off in France.
Huh. All right. Well, I learned
Yeah.
something new today. That's cool.
That's great.
Okay. So let's see. So how did you get started on piano? Because you said you started on piano when you were 5. So how did that happen?
Well, that was sort of when my parents were like helping me with looking at hobbies of things to do. And I remember a lot of my young childhood, actually. And I remember having a great interest in both music and dance. I wanted to do those things that cost money, that were not free, because being on a soccer team was definitely free. And my parents made sure that I also did that. I was quite bad at it, for the record, but it was free, so no money was spent on being bad at that hobby. So that's good. But the one that they had to pay for, they really wanted to make sure that they were investing well. I think my parents have always been very smart about this kind of thing. And they said, you can dance or you can take piano lessons, but you can only do one, and you have to stick with it. you cannot deviate and go back and forth, because then we won't let you, we won't pay for stuff if you're just going to do it for a little while and then drop it. And so I sat with that decision for a couple of weeks. I mean, I was 5, so it was a little bit, it was a little high pressure there. But I said, okay, I want to take piano. And of course, as any 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, the first couple of years I think was really rough for practice. Like, I really enjoyed it at the very first, and then the newness wears off, and little kids, like, they lose interest, and it's what they do. It's just part of nature, and time spans a lot longer for them. So it's just, my mom had to sit there with me with an egg timer and say, okay, practice for 5 minutes. And I practiced for 5 minutes, and then I could take a break. Okay, practice another 5 minutes, but we had to make sure we get in 15 minutes a day, 5 days a week. I have to say that is, now looking back on it, that is a really hard job as a parent, to sit there over your child and be like, let's practice for 5 minutes, and like not lose patience with that. I mean, she did it for a couple of years. Of course, there were a couple of times I remember just getting totally carried away with it. And then there were a couple of times where I remember my parents threatening to take me out of lessons because I wasn't practicing enough. So there were like ups and downs. It wasn't by any means this like perfectly linear like ascension into becoming a professional musician.
I
Yeah.
do appreciate the appreciation of your mother. As a parent myself, I'm
Yeah.
glad to know that at some point it will be appreciated.
It will be. It might be 20 years down the line, but it will be. Yeah, she
Yeah.
was very happy the day I finally said, "Wow, that really took a lot of work. Thank you for that." And she's like, "You're welcome." Like,
So you, as a performer now, you get to kind of travel a lot and perform lots of different places. I always think it's super interesting to ask, particularly organists, this question because um, you're not just it's not just about the space, but also about the instrument itself when you're traveling around. So, do you have a favorite performance space where you performed, or like a memory that was particularly special for some reason that you could tell us about?
oh, well, I think there are a few factors that I could talk about a little bit about first, if you don't mind, and then I could probably narrow it down to some places. I think for me, the factors are they're about the organ, and they're about the experience, but they're about so much more than that, as like offshoots of that. So part of the reason that I actually started traveling and I started competing was because I love going to new places, and I love seeing especially new cultures with different food and seeing how they like to do things, and just seeing another corner of the world and being able to understand it. And I think that's a part of like, that goes back to my curiosity in the instrument and this huge span of repertoire that we have the organ. Like, I think that can be really overwhelming at first, but I was more just super curious about it and wanted to know as much as I could, and I had a lot of time to learn it. I'm still learning all the time. But I think for me it was a lot about learning about the world too. So and I think that is why I had like an okay mindset for a lot of competitions. I kind of looked up competitions, and I said, oh, that competition is in this part of the world. Oh, I don't really feel an urge to go there. Maybe I've already been there. Or this competition, like I competed in Japan. I saw there was a competition in Japan, and I said, I gotta go to Japan. Like, if I get into this, it's gonna be so cool. They have such a rich culture for the arts. So, and I was fortunate enough to get to go. And a few times. And so that was one reason that I liked to go. Another reason is the people, where as you're talking to different organists, you're probably gathering that we're a very close-knit community because there's only so many of us. Whereas with pianists, you know, everybody plays piano, or vocalists, everybody, you know, sings. So it's harder unless you're localized in a geographically in a certain part of the world together. It's harder to like get to know everybody in your community. But in the organ world, it's pretty safe to say like all of us know at least 85% of the of each other. So which is really fun and really cool. So I think the community has something to do with it, like quite a lot to do with it as well. Um, and then of course the instruments and the actual experience itself. There are places that I went where I never even performed. There's the Schnittger organ that's from the 17th century in Kappel, Germany, which is a little town that's an hour north of Bremen, which is also kind of a little town. And so if you get on a train, maybe we took a bus there, I can't remember, but the town is nothing but the church with the organ in it, and like a beautiful field of cows. And then there is a bar that serves nothing but beer, and no food. And you have two bikes, and you can ride your bikes to the town next door, not on Sundays or Mondays because stores are closed those days in Germany. But you can go to the town next door and get some food and then bring it back and cook it. But it was like a 4.5 or 5 kilometer bike ride there, and then you have to carry everything back like on your back or in your basket and whatever. And I would say that was one of the most memorable experiences because, like, first of all, it was one of the best organs I've ever played in my life. I mean, it sounded great, and like it felt great too. And also, you were just isolated up there. It was just you and the organ. Like, trust me, there was no one else. Not even a phone call to anyone. Like, there was no reception. It was just like after 8 days, you're really like it's almost meditative, you know, it's just you and the instrument, and you really get to know it in a way that is hard to do with all the noise these days. So that was a very memorable experience. I would say every time I play at a convention is a memorable experience. In particular, though, when I played at the 2022 American Guild of Organists National Convention, I opened the final concert in Benaroya Hall. And I remember feeling so scared out of my mind, right? Because I was opening with the Dupre B Major Prelude and Fugue, which is a piece that all organists play and know and can listen to backwards and still know what it is, probably. And like, I remember feeling so scared to go out there and play that piece. And when I went out and I played and then I got up, I remember the crowd cheering in such a way where, you know, how you can just tell, like with audiences, you can sense them. And they cheered in such a way that they were all so happy for me. They were so supportive. And it's easy to like get lost in like social media and only see the negative and stuff like that. And especially with like news these days and everything, it's like very easy to just focus on that. But I was overwhelmed by how supportive the community was. When you're lost in your head, you totally think like, oh no, like these people who know what I do, if I'm not perfect, they're going to say something about me. But I didn't feel that way at all. I just felt like people were excited to be there, excited to hear this piece, this organ, excited to hear me, like just really looking forward to it. And I think that is something that I can never forget. And I feel that at every convention that people are just happy to be there. I think that's so important. So that's really memorable for me as well.
So that your description of like kind of why you have chosen to travel and perform is so wonderful. And I love that kind of impetus that doesn't actually have as much to do with music as it does about other things. Are there places that you're still hoping that you're going to get to travel?
Oh gosh, so many. So many. I mean, I I have spent a good amount of time in Paris. on vacation, but I have never seen, I've heard one clavicle instrument, but I haven't seen a lot of the epic clavicle instruments and cliquot instruments and etc. All throughout France. Let's see, trying to think anywhere else. I've always been curious about the bamboo organ in the Philippines. I'm just curious about it. There's an organ made entirely of bamboo. Yeah. So that's a really neat thing. I love Fisk instruments. I grew up in Massachusetts, which is not that far from Gloucester, which is where the Fisk company is. Unfortunately, Charlie Fisk died, I think, right before I was born. But one of the instruments that I learned to play on, I think, is one of the best instruments he ever built, which is at Mount Holyoke College. It's in Abbey Chapel. And I can't remember if it's I think it's an 84. I think it was built in 84. I'd have to look that up. But it's a suspended action two manual instrument. And it is just like, it really, first of all, whipped me into shape, required that I played with good technique and taught me that right away, right off the bat. But also is just sounds so beautiful. That's going to be, somewhat similar to the one that's down in Greensboro. And so I'm really excited to see that one because I've played Fisks through the ages.
Speaking of our Fisk here, can you talk about just maybe one of the pieces on the program that you're planning to play for us and why you decided to play it?
Sure. Oh, it's gonna be hard to choose. Let's see. Well, Fisk tends that particular one. Fisk tends to emphasize on eclecticism, and they tend to love to speak French. So they're versatile instruments, and it's possible to do most repertoire, I would say, if not all, on these instruments. But a lot of them have like a little bit of a French twang to them, especially in the reeds or in the mutation stops. So, for example, the Degrini Tiercent High would sound, I would think, very well there because the sounds are much more similar than many of the sounds that we have in America to sounds of original French organs. I think, see, I knew it was going to be hard to narrow it down to one, so I'm really sorry about this. But I also, I'm also really looking forward to playing the Portman because I think her piece, it has some French inspiration in there. Like there are some little organist nods to Dupre and the Tarantella. There's a little nod to the Dupre G minor fugue. Or I hear like even some Duraflé in the first movement, in the prelude. So, and they would have known like more French inspired instruments. Now her piece is, she gives a lot of freedom in registration to the performer. She makes this piece very approachable, very accessible. So it's going to be, I think, pretty easy to set up on the organ there. But I think just having that like little nod towards France is really nice. To have somebody who is also at the same time a modern female composer. She's a colleague of mine. So I think that will also sound really well on that instrument.
Okay, and so just some kind of non-organ related questions. Do you have things that you do when you're not practicing to relax or to chill out?
I do. Let's see. I I give away all of my stuff, so I don't have any crochet here right now, but I do crochet. Um, so I crochet. I crochet anything from scarves to blankets to amigurumi. I made Baby Yoda once before it was available in stores. And so I make that for like friends and stuff. And then I run, which is like that's like my way to feel good and like stay in shape because when we play the organ or when we play any instrument really, like you feel tired from that repetitive motion all the time, but at the same time you haven't like moved your body the way we are meant to move, so that can be really tricky. So I run. I have a running group that I run with here called the Rochester Road Runners. They're really cool. They're really fun. I do like to run outside, so I do run like all 4 seasons. Rochester right now is like pretty sketchy on the sidewalks, so I have been doing some treadmill running. But I like to get out when it's nice, when it's not nice. If there's snow, if there's rain, if there's wind, like I like to be out there. Um, and then the other thing I like to do is bake for people. I don't love baking for myself and then having this huge cake in the same room as me all the time. But like I love to bake for friends, and I love trying new recipes, especially that are really difficult.
What do you like to listen to when you're not listening to music that you're going to be preparing for yourself?
Oh no, I'm gonna expose myself. Okay. I have like a pretty wide variety. I would say of course like it's easy to just look at my running list, but I mean I was an 80s baby, I was a 90s kid. So like the 90s rap and early 2000s rap hip hop like really makes an appearance in a lot of those lists. I have a lot of those songs memorized. The brain space it takes up, I guess I can't memorize another organ piece because I have all those. um I listen to everything like while I'm working out, from like I love the Beatles to Biggie Smalls and Eminem, to my boyfriend introduced me to this I think they're like a British band called Spangle, which Spotify like pinned me as going through like a psychedelic belly dance phase when I started listening to them.
Well, thank you so much for talking with us today, Amanda. It's lovely to get to hear about you and hear you speak about the organ. And we are all looking forward so much to having you here February 21st, performing on the Fisk organ at Christ United Methodist Church. That's a 7:30 concert. If you have more questions for Amanda, you can join us at 6:30 for the pre-concert talk. And we look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you so much. Have a great day.